So Tesla stock has been absolutely on fire over the past year. That's no secret. It's up over 800%. However, just recently, it did dip a little, about 18%. And so naturally, I am getting questions on it, asking me whether I think right now is a good time to be buying the stock, or if I think it's too late to be buying at these higher levels, and just kind of what my overall feelings are on Tesla right now. And don't forget, Tesla, of course, is my second largest stock, so I have a lot riding on this company. Well, in today's video, we're gonna talk about why the stock has climbed by so much, why it recently dipped. We'll cover, of course, the valuation because it's pretty expensive right now, but we'll also talk about their business, how it's going right now, where I see it kind of going in the future. And of course, I will let you know what I plan to do myself with this stock, and I'll also let you know what I would do hypothetically if I didn't already own the stock. So it should be a fun one. I hope you guys enjoy this update on Tesla, and if you do, make sure you hit that like button. But let's go ahead and start by taking a look at what's been going on recently with this stock. Okay, now this is adjusted for the recent stock split, and you can see on this 5-year chart how the stock just really skyrocketed at the end there in 2020. And if we zoom into the past year to get a closer look, the big crash we had earlier this year where Tesla stock lost like well over half its value, it's kind of like barely even noticeable there because the stock proceeded to skyrocket by over 1,000%. And even today, after having dropped by about 18% from those highs, the stock is still up over 800% over the past year. That's insane. And full disclosure, I'm also up over 800% myself on my position as well. But as far as the recent dip, well, the broader market had a pullback and Tesla was already up by so much. So a small correction does make sense there. But the bigger story is, why did the stock shoot up by so much in the first place, and where does that leave their valuation today? Well, there's definitely been a lot of short squeezing going on. In fact, back in July, Tesla became the first stock in history to be shorted by more than $20 billion. So that later really turned into a bloodbath for short sellers as the stock just kept climbing and climbing, and shorts had to cover their positions, which ended up fueling the rally even more. On top of that, the broader market itself has been on fire for months, and that's likely given a lot of confidence to Tesla bulls to keep buying the stock. In fact, the Nasdaq alone has climbed by over 70% from their lows this year and is also up by over 26% year to date, reaching a new all-time high, despite this being one of the most disastrous years for our economy. Of course, it's not all been external though. Tesla themselves have been performing better than most were expecting this year. At a time when our economy is experiencing an even worse recession than likely the Great Recession, depending on the metrics you look at, which, by the way, when you think back to the Great Recession of 08 and 09, vehicle sales declined by over 20% in both of those years. And if we zoom into what we're seeing today, our vehicle sales crashed from over 16 million units in February to about half that amount in April at just 8.6, although we are now seeing a recovery as vehicle units climbed all the way back up to over 15 last month. But with the economy still in horrible shape, you'd expect the struggle to continue for a while as car companies struggle to get through it, and Tesla shouldn't really be immune to that. Yet somehow Tesla is kind of immune to it. Competitors like Ford and GM are expected to see revenue declines of 21% and 14% respectively this year, yet thanks to Tesla's rising popularity in the high-growth electric vehicle market that will continue to eat away at traditional automakers' market share, Tesla is actually still experiencing growth of over 20% this year. That's pretty crazy. And granted, bears always bring up profitability as the reason why Tesla is such a bad stock compared to its competitors, but even if we look at earnings growth over the next 5 years, Tesla is expected to average over 300% of profit growth on average, while Ford and GM are either flat or even negative. That's also pretty crazy. And that's what makes it so hard to value a stock like Tesla, because they're in such an early stage of their whole kind of entire existence. That's why a lot of bulls would argue that the price you pay today doesn't really matter enough to stay away from the stock, because Tesla will eventually grow into that valuation in the future. But as it stands right now, there just really isn't any way that I can justify Tesla's current valuation. And I'm going to show you some figures here that are pretty scary if you're a Tesla shareholder. Now, first of all, let's get some context in here. They've only recently started to turn a profit on a net income basis, with last year still being in the red. Obviously, this year should be green, and I think that'll likely continue well into the future with explosive growth, and that's why people are so bullish on the stock. But as it stands right now, this is a company that only brought in about $370 million of net income over the past year. And on a revenue basis, they keep surging higher, but it was still less than $25 billion last year. So how does all of that compare to their market cap? Well, a few quarters ago, it would have actually compared very nicely when you consider the growth, but after the stock skyrocketed in recent months, their market cap has now ballooned to over $400 billion. That's up from only around $40 billion last year. Guys, it's now approaching close to $500 billion, which we barely even started seeing any companies hit the $1 trillion mark like just about a year ago, and yet those giants brought in around 6 to 11 times more sales last year, like Microsoft, Apple, or Amazon. So does a company doing around 25 billion in sales and not even $1 billion in profits deserve to trade for close to $500 billion market cap? I think any unbiased and objective person would say probably not. I mean, we're now talking about a forward PE ratio that has surged to over 330. Sure, back then when it was only in the 40s, that was a great time to buy. And of course, I was buying the stock myself too. But now at over 330, that's pretty freaking high. Again, some of this is completely irrelevant because Tesla only recently started being profitable, and that huge growth will help them over the years. For example, on a PEG basis, which takes growth of the next 5 years into consideration, their PEG ratio is still higher than the rest, but not by a whole lot. It's just slightly above 3, while giants like Microsoft and Apple are around 2.5 or higher. Now, obviously, I'm just making these comparisons to illustrate certain points. They're obviously not the greatest comparisons because they're much different companies. And you could certainly argue, well, how could you even think about comparing Tesla to these other giant corporations? But on the other hand, you could also argue that Tesla will probably see much higher growth than these other companies in the future. And so the higher price tag that you pay for Tesla isn't really all that unthinkable. And in my opinion, Tesla definitely has some major growth coming its way in the future. According to Forbes and Statista, when looking at the best-selling electric vehicles through the first half of this year, Tesla not only destroyed the competition with the Model 3, but the new Model Y crossover has already become the second best-selling EV in the world and will likely continue to see explosive growth in the future as it competes in the largest vehicle segment of crossover SUVs. Although I will note that I really think they need to bring the price down at some point because it starts at about 50,000. I think there's a 45,000 version coming, but I really think that they need a 40,000 to really reach the larger mass market, but we'll see what happens with that. Anyway, besides those two, even their legacy Model X, which is way more expensive than the other two and is a lot older, is still selling in the number 3 spot, and that's pretty freaking incredible. It just shows really the brand strength that Tesla has. So as the EV market takes over the ICE market, I just think Tesla is going to be the biggest player, and that'll bring in huge revenues. On top of that, the Cybertruck will be a much bigger deal than I think most people realize, as the Ford F-150 pickup truck was the best-selling car in America. So there's a huge market opportunity there for the Cybertruck. They're also expanding their Gigafactories, with a giant one being built in Texas that will be much larger than both the factory in Fremont and the one in Shanghai. And they even have the Giga Berlin to gain even better exposure to Europe as well. Of course, they're still expanding in China also, which was a bigger market than all the other countries in the world combined last year, and Tesla's just kind of barely scratching the surface there. And I think this year Europe is overtaking China as a whole, so Tesla will, either way, Tesla's going to be a huge player in some of the biggest markets globally, and that's a really good thing. And then on top of all of that, there's still other huge growth drivers like what they're doing with autonomous driving, which, by the way, really no other company is even close to Tesla in that area except for maybe Google. But we know that Tesla's going all in on a robotaxi future, which, if you look at that market opportunity there, ARK Invest estimates that over the next 10 years, that market will be worth $9 trillion, which is more than what the ride-hailing market, the entire automakers market, and the entire energy sector are worth combined today. If that ends up being true, today's price for Tesla is probably chump change. Not to mention that what they're doing with energy storage, which I think will solve many of the problems that renewable energy markets are facing today. And then there's also the semi-truck that could also disrupt the gigantic global freight market. And my speculation on that is really that I think Tesla will probably go into the logistical services business as well, which could be huge. And by the way, according to the American Trucking Associations, gross freight revenues from trucking in the US alone was almost $800 billion in 2018, and that'll likely get much larger in the future all around the world too. But then there's even more abstract areas where Tesla can attain even more growth, like their partnership with the Boring Company to provide Teslas for underground travel, which I think is a brilliant idea for the future of these giant cities that are plagued by traffic and congestion and really need to turn to underground tunnels to provide faster and autonomous travel. So that could also be a nice opportunity for Tesla as well. Anyway, the point is that it's really easy to criticize Tesla's very expensive valuation based on where they are as a company right now, but it's also very hard to know exactly how big Tesla will become in the future. And because of that, there is a little bit of speculation in Tesla stock. And it's one of the reasons why so many investors are so hesitant to be buying Tesla stock. It's why it's loved by so many, but also hated by so many. It's a very polarizing stock. And I think that's a big reason why. So when you ask me the question, is now the time to be buying Tesla stock? Well, first of all, you guys know that I don't give like personal advice on my channel. I only share my own opinion and what I'm doing myself. But just to kind of try to address that topic or that question, I'm gonna put myself in two different scenarios. In one of those scenarios, we'll say that I already own the stock and I'm trying to decide what to do from here. And that's actually the reality of the situation. That is that is the real situation that I'm in right now. But then we'll also throw in a second scenario and we'll say, what if hypothetically I do not already own Tesla stock? What would I do right now based on everything that's going on? Well, starting with the first scenario, saying that I already own the stock. Well, okay, so this is the scenario I'm actually in right now. It's my second largest stock. I have a really low cost basis on it. I'm very happy with my position. So am I going to be buying more Tesla stock at this super high valuation? We took a look at that in the video. Obviously, the valuation is very high. Objectively, we can say that the valuation is very high. Tesla stock is expensive right now. So do I want to be adding and buying at these higher levels? No, not really. I just can't justify it. I can't convince myself. You have to remember though, I have a personal strategy where I like to buy stocks the most when they're going down, not when they're going up. And Tesla stock is up over 800% over the past year. This just goes completely against my investing principles. So for those reasons, I will not be buying at these levels. But at the same time, I'm still not selling out of my position because Tesla is a company that I really believe in, that I really love, and that I want to be a part of. And so I want to hold that stock into the future. So I'm not selling either. Now, the other scenario is really the more interesting one, because now we're saying hypothetically, I do not already own the stock. And so this is a company that I really believe in, that I really love, that I really want to be a part of, but the valuation is extremely high. So what do I do from here? Well, okay, first of all, in this scenario, I have to accept the kind of premise that I missed the boat on this stock. Obviously, if this is a company that I love and this is a stock that I want to own, it's insane that I didn't buy the stock when it was way cheaper. So we have to understand what kind of a person am I in this scenario, because if you're someone who did not buy the stock when it was a lot cheaper, that tells me that you probably never really believed in Tesla as a company. So if you didn't believe in them when the stock price was way cheaper, why all of a sudden do you believe in them now that the stock price is a lot higher? It sounds to me more like you're seeing the stock surge up and now you just want to buy it because you're scared of like missing the boat. So the first step here is to just accept the fact that you pretty much missed the boat. You should have bought them a long time ago, which is what I did. You should have done that if you really believed in the company, and now you wouldn't really have this problem that we're trying to deal with in this scenario. So that's the first thing. Accept the fact that I did kind of miss the boat. But if I still really like the company, I still really want to be a part of it, here's what I would do. So I would buy a very tiny amount of Tesla stock, like about 1% of my portfolio. And that's usually, you guys know this, that's usually what I do with brand new positions. I usually buy just like a very, very tiny amount, and then I look to add to that over time. But that is especially crucial in this scenario where Tesla stock is already up by so much. And here's why I like buying just a tiny amount right here, because if the stock, there's two possible outcomes from here. So one, the stock could surge up, or two, the stock could go way down. Well, if the stock goes up a huge amount, at least you have a very tiny amount, and something is better than nothing. I know it sounds dumb. I know you're thinking, well, if I only buy a small amount, I'll be really pissed that the stock took off and I didn't buy more. Yeah, true, but you already kind of missed the boat. You have to accept that the stock is already very expensive. You have to accept that it's better to have at least something rather than nothing. So you'll be happy that you at least bought at least a tiny amount of the stock. And if it was to go up, then obviously you probably wouldn't be buying more because it's just getting more and more expensive unless the company is performing way better, but that's going to take a lot of time. So in that scenario, what you'd probably have to do is wait for a pullback or a correction, maybe like a broader market correction or crash. Don't forget, we just had a crash earlier this year. Market corrections happen all the time. There will be dips and there will be buying opportunities. So you buy a tiny amount here, and by you, I mean me. So I buy a tiny amount here and the stock goes up a huge amount. That's okay. At least I have some, I'm part of it. I'm part of the rally. And when the overall market kind of pulls it kind of drags it back down, then I can buy my really big position. Then I can start buying very heavily and eventually I'll have that big position. It's just gonna take more time. That's the thing about this kind of scenario. It's gonna take more time and you're gonna have to be patient. The other outcome is that the stock could go down from here. And so you only buy a very tiny amount, like about 1% of the portfolio, and the stock goes down. Well, guess what? You saved all of that extra money. Instead of buying in heavy, now when the stock goes down, you can double your position, triple your position, quadruple, quintuple. You can really build up a very large position as the stock goes down, and you'll be happy that you only bought a small amount rather than going in huge. And now the stock goes down and you're like, oh man, why did I buy so much? I knew the valuation was really expensive. Why did I buy so much? So that's whenever I'm putting myself in these scenarios, I try to think, what can I do to make sure that I have a win-win situation no matter what happens? And this is really the only way you can do it. And yes, it is the more cautious approach. And yes, you might not come out of it with humongous gains, but it's a safer approach. It's a more relaxing approach. You're not going to stress out a ton about it. And in the end, you'll win kind of no matter what happens. Maybe not to the same degree, but you'll still kind of win and it'll overall be a net positive. Okay, so I hope I made sense. I hope I didn't just kind of ramble on there, but hopefully you guys could understand what I'm trying to say here. Anyway, my position, I'm holding it. I will continue to hold it. I'm very happy with it. And we'll see what happens. I'm very excited about Tesla's future, and I'll be sure to keep making update videos for you guys. But let me know what your opinions are down below. Do you agree with my thoughts, my opinions? Let me know down there. And what are you guys doing? I'd love to hear that as well. But thank you so much for watching the video. And if you enjoyed it, please hit that like button. It really means a lot. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.